Good afternoon, everyone. As we wait for the life to build up, welcome to Tobago CivilNet second discussion. This discussion is called Talk the Real Thing. What an exciting name to be involved in this discussion. And tonight, I'm your host, Latoya Roberts, and we are going to talk to some lovely ladies, some distinguished ladies tonight about a very interesting topic, women talk politics. I think that is a really interesting topic because women could talk many other things, but definitely politics is something that is key to us as women as we develop in society. And this event is the second session being hosted by Tobago CivilNet. I know some of you all are wondering who is this new organization? You got a friend invite to join the live or you asked to join a Facebook page. So basically, Tobago CivilNet is a group of non-aligned, that's really important, civil society organizations, NGOs, and citizens who care about the holistic development of Tobago. And when we're talking about the holistic development, we're talking about anything to do with Tobago's growth and development. We as the citizens, we as NGOs, we as civil society would like to talk about that. And the body includes representatives who are within the field of education, agriculture, environment, youth development, arts and culture, tourism, business, any sector in the Tobago society. We as Tobago CivilNet care about Tobago development. In partnership with Tobago Channel 5, the group hosted events such as conversations with the candidates when we did the general elections 2020. The group has also been responsible for hosting Honorable Ralph Gonzalez when he visited Tobago and had a public conversation on reparations. You all remember that lecture series at the library? That was a powerful one. And we have also had conversations on good governance in collaboration with the Tobago Library Services, the Tobago Library Services. So this group has been around, give or take, for about 2 years, really engaging in discussion, engaging in discourse, and this evening will be no different at all, as we talk the real talk. And tonight the topic is Women Talk Politics. Key partners for this program has been Youth Voice Matters, Tobago Writers Guild, Tobago Entrepreneurs, Tobago Literary Support, and Environment Tobago. And before we get any further, I really want to introduce some of the exciting ladies that are going to talk the real talk tonight with me. And we have two lovely young women on the panel this afternoon, complemented by two other seasoned women. And it's really good that we have a blend of youth and the more mature. So we're going to have a balanced discussion. We're going to have different perspectives and different views. I would like to introduce the first person. When you talk about politics, we know this woman. This woman is Miss Union Job, and she has represented women in the Caribbean as the chairman of the Commonwealth Women Parliamentary Association. She's also been on the Caribbean, Atlantic, and Americas Region Committee, and she's one of the 9 members of a steering committee for Caribbean Women Parliamentary. And she has been involved in politics for a long while, so she has wonderful history to share with you. Mrs. Job, say hi to Tobago.
Thank you, Latoya. Good evening, Tobago. Good evening, everybody.
So that's a powerful woman we have on the panel, but we ain't done with woman power yet because we have so many other wonderful women on the panel. So let's go to other people. Let me introduce Miss Joanne John. Now, first time I'm really interacting with this woman, but I'm really delighted that she's on the panel this afternoon, and I'm happy to hear a lot from her. Miss John was born in San Fernando, Trinidad, and she grew up in Canada. She enjoyed a long career in the federal public service, and she returned to Tobago 2.5 years ago, where she now owns and operates the Whining Goat. What a name for a business, right? But it's all about good sale and good marketing, I suppose, where she focuses on wines and a tapper bar. She's also a certified career and life coach, and she has grown 2 sons, and she has a wonderful life partner. here in Tobago. And is that a dog, a terrier, a Tobago terrier? What is that, a dog? Wow. Okay, so Miss John, say hello. Unmute the mic and say hello to the people of Tobago. Can we have the mic unmuted?
Yes, hi.
Right.
Yeah, hi. Thanks very much for the introduction. Yes, I do own a Tobago Terrier. I thought that was a nicer name than a pot hound. Apparently, they got rebranded and they're now Tobago Terriers. So I do own one of those. Thanks for being part of this. I didn't know a thing about it until someone asked me to join this morning at around 11 o'clock. I said I was free, and it sounded like a really interesting panel, and it sounded like we will, that this group is doing some really cool things, and so I'm happy to be part of it. So thanks everyone. And
wonderful.
I like that you said that we were seasoned, because it sounds like we're going to go in the pot too.
Well, maybe it's going to be a melting pot of discussion tonight, right? And
Yeah.
then let's go to the younger woman on the panel. Don't be fooled by the ages or the youth, because they're coming with a lot of great ideas. First, I'm going to introduce you to Miss Janet Campbell. She's the current president of the Tobago Youth Council, and she is actually the recently, I'll have to say, not sworn in yet, but recently elected youth area rep for the constituency of Belgarden, East Roxwood, Dallaford in the Tobago Youth Assembly project. She's an ardent supporter for equitable representation. She sounds like a politician already, in all spheres of life. And she credits her charismatic behavior and spirited disposition as the reason for her success. Janae?
Hello, good night, everyone. Hello, Tobago. It's indeed a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to an interesting and inspiring discourse. Thank you.
Welcome, Jenny. And then now we have the last but not least, Alia Holder, who sees herself as a visionary, a youth leader, and an advocate. She believes in equity and not equality. She believes that the CDEMA youth rep, she was that for Trinidad and Tobago a few years ago, and she's also the founder of Youth Elevating Youths. And she believes in giving youth a voice in all decisions, as the future of the youth begins with youth today. Alia, welcome to this panel this evening.
Thank you very much, Latoya, and I'm looking forward to having a great discussion with these seasoned ladies and these young ladies as well.
Wonderful. And well, I am your host, Latoya, but just, a normal citizen here on the island of Tobago, just like to be involved, like to know what's going on, and hoping for the best for the island development. I just like to ask those who are joining in on the live, you are free to give your comments, pose your questions, etc. We really want your participation in this discussion. Tobago Civil Net Core is really to ensure that we have citizens who are educated, citizens who are aware of the issues that are going on around them, citizens who can be involved in the discussion. We are non-aligned. We are not tied to any political party in any way. And this discussion is just to engage the people of Tobago, no matter which side of the fence that you are on. So tonight we're talking about Women Talk Politics, a really spicy topic, I think. And I really want to hit the ball rolling by asking tough questions at the start. And my first question is, do you think women have a hard time getting into politics? That is my first question. And I'm going to ask Ms. Job, since she's been in there, what her journey was like. Was it hard? Do you have to beg people to put you on a political card? Do you have to, I don't know, pay your way in? Is it hard for women to get into politics?
Thank you, Latoya, again. My journey, listen, I never thought I would ever become a politician. That was never on the cards for me. I always thought I was going to be a preacher, but I ended up in politics. Are you hearing me? Are you hearing me?
Yes, we are.
Okay, great. And so when I decided that I wanted to get involved in politics, but at the strategic level, planning, the background work and so on, never frontline politics. And then Tobago was not PNM for quite a while, 26 years actually or more. And so there was nobody who wanted to go up for Tobago East. They asked several prominent women in Tobago and everybody declined. And so it came down to me. And I didn't just accept it, I prayed a lot about it. And then I got my answer and I decided to go in. So I didn't have to beg to go in. I didn't have to ask to go in. They actually asked me to come in because they wanted a warm body on the seat, and that could not, they didn't think that the seat could have been won. As a matter of fact, the PNM was losing that seat every election by over 5,000 to 6,000 votes. And even the PNM people were not interested in voting, because when I went, some people tell me, girl, I will like you, but you're not win that seat here, so me not even bother for waste my votes. That year was 2000, and when I campaigned right throughout Tobago East, and the seat came in, I lost by 200 instead of the 5,000, and that would have been the Tobago, the PNM people who didn't vote. But I ran 3 elections, and 2000, 2001, and 2002. There were challenges because, as you would know, and as most of Tobago will know, Tobagonian women, most of us have very strong personalities, and it would have clashed with men, because I don't think that some of the men, not all, some of the men couldn't treat with strong women. And so that was a problem. So after winning the seat in 2000, London decided that I was not supposed to go back. And they tried to get rid of me in 2001. The old people in Tobago said, no, if you do that, we're not going to vote. And so I had to go back. And the second time they tried to get rid of me, the same thing happened. So I eventually became the MP for Tobago East. In 2001, was appointed Minister of Tourism and Culture. And that in itself, there were some issues with that, because they saw me as a woman, 1, 2, was Johnny come lately in politics, and 3, they wanted one of the boys for the position. So straight away, I encountered that kind of male domination that has characterized politics, not just in Trinidad and Tobago, but globally.
Okay, great. I think that is really a good story to show of your life journey, and what worked for you may not necessarily work for others. So my question to probably Alia or Janae, as a young person, what do you think may be the barriers that women face as they advance or get into politics? You haven't been there yet, but you're probably looking around at it and you've probably seen some barriers. What do you think are the barriers that women may face? I'll go with Jenny first, and then Alia could tell me.
All right, good night, everyone. One of the predominant barriers that I would face and that I think that women face would be, ideal threats to person's character. As a woman, you may have a past, or you might experience certain things in life, and it's much easier for you to be scrutinized with a fine-teeth comb, especially when you step out into the public arena, and that can have like a negative effect on persons entrusting in you to be their area representative. And you would find that, like with any area, it doesn't even have to be politics, it could be sports. Anytime you do something good, there would be persons who would always bring up something that they didn't admire about you, or some mistake that you would have made a long time before, and that could really be an hindrance to your personal advancement. And to some extent, that really creates a barrier to many Tobago women. I think my views are somewhat different. I think as a society we are emerging, and there's greater acceptance of women in politics and indeed other spheres of life. However, while we as a society might think that the patriarchal ideals would have been a thing of the past in some persons still hold on to these ideologies, and as such, that can prevent persons. But if we look at the trend in Tobago right now, we would see the emergence of we saw the emergence of one of the first female political leaders of the People's National Movement. I think that's an achievement. So I think persons just need to, be headstrong and continue know what you want, go get it, and the minor hindrances should not really keep you back. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say.
And what about Alia? Do you share the same views that it's easy for women nowadays to get into politics? They didn't have to go through all the hurdles that Udine went through in her time.
I wouldn't say that it's quite easy as Johnny would have placed it across the board. It is not as hard as before, but it is not as easy as you think it may be. Because being a woman itself is a threat to anyone, because women are powerful and we are most vulnerable people. And I believe that as women, we have a lot to say, and men feel like we are bombarding their spaces and we want to get to the top without them, when it is totally not like that. So I would have seen certain females stepping up to the plate and trying to break generational curses as pertains to going into politics. More women are taking the mantle up and going into politics now. But I would have experienced in January when we had the first all-female parliament, when Caribbean Sewell had the first female youth parliament, that there was a big uproar about why they didn't have an all-male parliament instead of a female parliament. It was a big talk. And my thing is that we are all here to do the same thing. And if we don't need men alone, we need women too. So if it goes hand in hand, because one person cannot carry the mantle alone, and the same ideas that a woman has, men may have it as well, but we may think better on it, and both our ideas can collab to make a better way forward. So I think that as females, we need to not see it as a threat, as men don't want us in politics, but we need to step up to the mantle and go into it, whether it be hard or easy, because if you want it, as Johnny said, go for it. That's my take on it.
I think that is really encouraging for the young people, very hopeful. Miss John, do you share the same view? Do you think today it's easy for women to get into politics, or do you think that it's really still difficult? There are so much hurdles, like what Miss Job explained. What do you think about that, Miss John? Unmute the mic so we can hear your contribution.
Um, well, it's interesting because as everyone was speaking, I was thinking, I come from a different part of the world, and women have tried to break into politics, over the last number of decades in Canada as well, and they've achieved some success, and it has been, we now have a much larger complement of women in our parliament, and we have the same parliamentary system as Trinidad and Tobago has, a Westminster parliamentary system. So we have the same way of, people are voted in the same way, elections are run the same way, more or less. There's not much difference there. But what I'm interested in, what was interesting is that some of the challenges are still the same. You still have women saying that they're not always heard as much as the men are heard when they want to bring their ideas to the fore, even if they've already been elected and they're running, they're running departments, or they're running their ministers and whatnot. They still sometimes have to struggle to find themselves in the really great portfolios. They tend to start off always as junior ministers instead of full portfolio ministers, whereas the men tend to slide into the full portfolio ministries. Women have come a long way in a number of different spheres, but I think there's still many issues, not just in politics, but also in business, in anywhere where women need to, where women's representation is increasing. We can often pose a threat. We, as it was mentioned, to men, we are often more vulnerable to discrimination. We're often more vulnerable to what was being, slander and our past being dredged up in a way that men wouldn't be. And I think that a lot of I've noticed a lot of things since I've been in Tobago that I think could change to help empower women more. And and certainly the more women get into politics, the more they have the opportunity to change things. And I think that so long as they don't then get into politics and start becoming just like the men, which is also often an issue. If we can get into politics and maintain our place as women who represent, then we're good.
And that is an important point to move to the next question. But before we get to the next question, I want to remind those viewers who are joining, this is a production of Tobago Civil Net. It's a group of NGOs here on the island of Tobago that just care about everything Tobago and want to engage in really healthy discussion about different topical issues happening in Tobago. Ms. John, I want you to continue your response, bearing in mind this question. Do you think, I don't know if you have any experience or do you know, but do you think that there may be different criterias that these political parties use on their screening committees when they're selecting a man versus a woman? What is your thoughts on that? Is there one rubric, or is there, you need to ask these questions because the person is female and these are the standard questions that go ahead with male candidates? What do you think?
Oh, I think so. I think absolutely. I don't think that sometimes there's a thing that I've been paying a lot of attention to called unconscious bias of late. And unconscious bias is basically when people behave in they see things in very stereotypical or biased ways without even really understanding it and recognizing that they're doing it. I think that happens with women a lot when we go for job interviews, when we're trying, as I say, to get our point across. Men are very rarely told I spent a lot of time around boardroom tables in my career, and if a woman starts to speak up at a boardroom table, she starts to make her point known. She's being talked over. She's not being, men are finishing their sentences. She's being mansplained things to, meaning that men feel they have to explain it out in a way they wouldn't explain it to another man. And if she starts to stand up against that, and she starts to try to make her voice heard even more, she's seen as aggressive. Whereas if that happened if that was the situation with a man, he's seen as he's forthright and he's forceful and he's just trying to get his point across. We are often put into these boxes that society wants to still see us in. And I think in some societies, maybe more so in a smaller place like Tobago, where the evolution has been slower for women, there are still many instances where I have been here in various committees and whatnot. And I mean, there are lots of that people are respectful and the men are generally respectful, but I still hear some of that, what I call that unconscious bias. I also still hear a lot of language that I would change if I were a politician. And that would be things like, I think it's time we stop saying manpower. It's time we stop saying, words that stewardesses, when there are many men who are flight attendants. We should, like, some of the language and stuff, I think also helps. My background's English literature and English language, so maybe that's my bias, but I think that some of that helps. It helps to change the way that women are viewed when we start to speak about them differently as well.
Ms. Job, I want to bring you in here because you have went through an actual screening process. Like, what do they look for? What is on those questions when people go into that room? Is it a hard process?
No, well, it depends. What generally happens is that you are screened by the leadership of the party, predominantly men. You may have one or so female on the interview panel. However, the persons in the room, those on the floor, also are able to ask questions. Now, they will ask things that you're supposed to know. Why do you want to get into politics? Why, what are you going to do for the people? Your economic, your social, whatever questions. They ask general questions. And because we have other female on the floor, we ask the men the same questions. So it is not a matter of a question for you and a question against you. Yeah. I have had just general questions asked of me. And what I say to women who want to get into politics, it is not about the stiletto, and it's not about the men keeping you down, and it's not about all of that. It's about you. If you want to get into politics, you got to be okra with all the issues that are happening in your society or the area you want to represent. And so once you have that information, once you are armed with that information, they can throw any kind of boulders at you. You will just deal with them. Okay? So the first thing you have to do is to be prepared. Yeah? When you get in there, again, like I say, it's another story. And I remember one incident when I was in caucus, and I took on two of the senior leaders because they did something and I was really, really upset about it. So I voiced my opinion. And when we left the caucus, one of my colleagues, male colleagues, telephoned me. He said, Eugene, you know you went up against two of the most powerful men in the PNM. And I said, hello, we all went to the same school. We all went to university. We all did the same things. I probably all have my degree probably a little better than theirs. So what do you tell me about powerful men in politics? I said, when Eric Williams said, hey, the future of this nation lies in the book bag of the children, that was my book bag. And that was the book bag of every woman in this country. And so once we are qualified, there is no powerful men. We are just as powerful. You move one of them from their seat, then the parliament is decreased. So our presence there is just as important as any male presence. But I want to say this is a word of caution, because what I have found in politics is that women are also women's worst enemies.
A word to the wise there. You don't want to say anything else more than that?
No, well, when I allow somebody else to speak, I don't want to take up your whole program.
Fair enough, fair enough. I want to move a bit to Janae and Alia. And for Janae, she recently participated in some election process of this sort. Maybe eventually you will get into active politics, but what are your recommendations or what are your thoughts as it relates to parties and their screening process, and what could you recommend that they can consider and do better?
All right, so this doesn't necessarily have anything to do with any gender bias. However, I would have listened attentively to the political leader of the People's National Movement, Miss Tracy Davidson Celestine, when interviewed, and they asked what are some of the criteria that they look for in their screening committee. And the first answer she gave was winning ability. So it seems as if emphasis is predominantly placed on just winning the seat. Emphasis is placed on popularity rather than who would actually be able to make some meaningful change and would be able to provide some representation for the persons in that constituency. So my admonition and my recommendation is to not just focus on popularity, but we need persons who are skilled. So we need to ensure that these persons have their educational background in check, and persons that you go through a meticulous process and ensure that these persons are actually willing and would deliver their roles with a level of efficacy. Because what I realize is at times, sometimes the persons that get the jobs aren't the best man or the best woman for the job, all because of the way how the system is set up in terms of popularity and who is my friend, and so I might be your friend as a political leader, or whatever the situation may be. And we have a case where persons are occupying roles which aren't cut out for them, and that places other persons that might be able to do a better job as a disadvantage, and by extension that places us as a society at a disadvantage, because when the leaders of these divisions are ineffective, it really trickles down to every varying sector of society, and we as the citizens now have to face the repercussions of that. That could be avoided if the right persons are placed in these areas. So that is my recommendation.
Well said, Janae. Alia, think futuristic. If you become the leader of a party, or if you start your own party or being placed in management position, what you think are the criteria to leadership? What you think are the criteria that that person could make it into your your court, your party, your room? And give an example of you think what are the criteria that we need for governance, the criteria that we need for leaders in the island here in Tobago.
So January is an important point of popularity, which is what happens on the island and in the country of Trinidad and Tobago. Um, on that same topic of popularity, I think that although you are popular, personality has a lot to do with someone who is a leader, as it pertains to being humble and being caring and passionate about the views of persons, because persons go into leadership, any leadership role, whether it any leadership role, like people go into leadership for the greater good of it, which comes down to money and stuff like that. But we forget the people when we get there, because the people are the ones who elected us to be there, and their issues are the ones that we need to take care of. It is our issues as well. So I think that persons need to look at persons. If I would become a politician in the future, really not on my agenda, but if it happens, I will look at person's personality as well as how they interact with persons, because someone personalities could lead you down one road and their interaction with persons is a totally different thing. Also, persons in a community, teamwork has a lot to play with someone who is a leader. So if you are involved in a lot of community work and you do a lot for your community and it's not all about self-praise, and it is actually genuine and for your community, and you see that it's genuine, like you could call somebody 11 o'clock at night and say that my neighbor pipe and working and I needed to come and fix it. Those genuine persons who don't have a problem with going out and help, those are persons we need in leadership. Persons who I wouldn't like to use the word sell their soul, but give their all into leadership and helping others. Those are persons that we need. Like, you don't need persons who will say, I help she, and it's because we don't need it. We don't need we know you help them, but we don't need the I help and the don't do it. It's not cute. It really isn't. So I think that the politicians that we have now, they need to look at that, and also the ones that are getting into the arena, you all need to look at that as well and check yourself before you wreck yourself. That's my advice.
Check yourself before you wreck yourself. The message from the young persons and the panelists is really, let us look at the criteria a little bit tighter. Let us make sure that the person that we choose fit into people, fit into service, and not necessarily about self, not necessarily about boasting about what you have done for the community, but what you genuinely just wanted to contribute. We have a question coming in from social media, so I'm going to read it and I'm going to leave it open for anyone to comment. What do you think about the lack of feminine energy in the politics? There is no soft, nurturing, intuitive, creative, empathetic energy. And do you think that kind of energy should play a bigger role in our politics? How do we get more of that yin? You know, there's the yin and the yang. So I guess the yin energy in our governance. Anyone?
Okay, I think I can start that off. As a woman and having worked throughout the Commonwealth, we need to understand the reason why women are supposed to be in politics. And as Joanne intimated, that's Joanne, right? I don't want to call your name wrong, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, that started hundreds of years ago, over 400. Well, I just went back 400 years. And just recently, we saw the notorious RBG, Judge Ginsburg, she passed on. But what was interesting is that a host of young women would have alluded to her influence in their lives as becoming lawyers and politicians and so on. Now, prior to all of that, and I'm just going to give a little bit of history here, the politics was really male dominated. And women started all over the world, they started agitating because issues that uh, the issues that the country needs to look at, they're women's issues as well. But there were other issues that would not come to the table because it was a male-dominated parliament. And Sarah Grimke, she was a Black woman, slave parentage, over maybe 300 years ago. She popularized the statement, if you get your knees from our necks, we can stand upright. So women were being really pushed to the ground. Why were they going to get involved in politics? The question. And one of the answers to that is the issues that everybody sweeps under the rug. Men said those issues were not in the public domain. That was private. So you could beat up your wife anytime, commit domestic violence, commit incest, do rape them, and there were no consequences. And so women politicians were supposed to go to the parliament to enact legislation to deal with these situations. And it is ironic that 400 plus years ago, they started this movement. And it went to 1995 in the Beijing Convention. We had the Beijing Platform for Action, where Boutros Ghali hailed women as being the nurturers of a society. And if you take care of your women, you take care of a society. And we always say the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. But it doesn't seem to resonate anymore because women are the mothers of prime ministers and presidents. And how you think they get there? It's from the women. And a lot of times these were single mothers. Yeah. So it is ironic as well that the United Nations in 2020, after the Beijing Platform for Action and everybody signed on to this thing and say, right, we're going to deal with the incest and the rape and so on. We have today people in our assembly who are charged with rape and they are ably supported by women. As I said, I have been throughout the Commonwealth from Fiji to Nigeria to Bermuda, wherever, dealing with women's issues. And, nobody is saying somebody is guilty. I'm not saying that at all, because you're innocent until proven guilty. But I cannot support anybody who at this time is charged with rape. And even now, opening my papers every morning, up to tonight on the news, children are being raped, boys are being raped, young women are being cut, and the politicians, the female politicians, are silent. So as Miss Young Lady, Miss Alia said, it seems to be, it's winnability. So it is not what you are going in there to do. And I'm saying to the younger ones now who want to get in there, that you're not just going there to wear stiletto heels and post on Facebook with a long shoes and nothing. You got to climb the ladder and you got to do the work. It's ground work and you can use your stiletto, but know that you're going down in the trenches with it. So if you want the heel to break off, you can go down there with it. But other than that, no way you're going in there for. You're not going in there to play this and to play that and to dress and miss well. That's not it at all, right? Because we still have issues to deal with. And so in answer to the question, it is not about feminine. It is about feminine going in there and doing what you have to do. Because we had this thing where you call put a woman. But it's not any woman. It's a woman who wants to go in there and not, as Joanne said, become like the man. And that is what is happening. And so my experience has shown that if the leader ostracizes you, you have no support from the women. They are helped to ostracize you and they help to bring you down. And so when we get to the point where we can, as women, understand what our role is, and if you go back to South Africa when in apartheid, Nelson Mandela stood up and he said, when our women stand up, in this country, apartheid would fall. And that is exactly what happened. We are strong. We don't want to take over the roles of men. We want them to be leaders in our homes, but they have relinquished the role in a lot of instances. Look at education. The most people going in there is women. You go to a law school at any time. If you find 10 men out of 200 women, you find plenty. You know, so yes, we want more women in answer to the question, but we want women who understand what their roles are, not just for the feminine and the nurturing. And so you need to go in there and do some work.
Well, that was a whole mouthful. I don't know if our younger perspective have anything to add to that. What do you think is the woman's role in politics right now? Do we really bring that yin to the table? Or do we go in there and start behaving like the men and just bring more yang? Janae, your thoughts on that?
Well, I would definitely have to agree with the sentiment shared by Miss Job. As she would have said, the issue doesn't lie with the amount of persons that are occupying these political positions. Like I would have mentioned before, you need persons that are effective and are committed to the cause. So when persons go into politics, I guess as when females go into politics, I'm not trying to judge anybody, but at times I could understand why persons might say that we lack that, feminine touch and, compassion. I think it has to do with not all, I don't think this is just a feminine issue. I think it translates to politics generally. As persons assume their positions, it's very easy for them to become complacent and neglect their real goals and objectives in representing the interests of the people. So that is an issue that translates among both genders. However, as women, as Miss Jo would have said, sometimes we are our own detriment. We need empowered women and virtuous women who will go in and really make the difference and really actualize the change that we want to see, and let us come out of that state of dormancy and really start addressing the issues that directly affect women. I must say I have seen some efforts by a few of our female politicians. Everyone will have a different opinion on it. However, it is undoubted that more efforts and more emphasis needs to be placed on bringing that feminine touch and compassion and benevolence to the political arena. And like I said, it's a whole system that is corrupted. The issue therein lies with finding persons that are fit for the job. Once we address that issue, then all the others the solutions will come.
Okay. I want to change the gears a little bit, still sticking on the role of the woman, but the woman more in a supportive role. So my question to you is, do you think female spouse of prime ministers or chief secretaries, etc., play enough of a significant role? So if the leader of the land is male, but behind every man there's supposed to be a strong woman, in our current context, do you see the female of the person the female spouse of the person in leadership playing enough of a role in the development of the country or the island? In America, being the first lady is a big thing. But how do we look at our first ladies here? How do we look at that female support that may support somebody who is in power, who is the male? How do we think that plays out in the Tobago? Jenny, we'll go with you, and then I'll also move on to Ali about that, because you're all not married as yet, but tell me what you think the woman of the spouse of the man who is in leadership should look like, and what they should do in that leadership role.
The most I can say is make your presence known. In the Tobagonian context, we do not really place the first lady and the spouses of our parliamentarians or prime minister in a high place in the hierarchy. However, like I said, behind the scenes, you would have your role as a woman. You need to be empathetic, and as the spouse of the leader of the nation, I would assume that you would be able to address and advocate on behalf of issues affecting women and society better than anyone else can. So the issue therein lies with women being passionate about these things, because there are persons that just couldn't care less, to just nonchalant, okay, well, things good over here, I couldn't be bothered. I good over here and I don't really business. But we need persons who, you know, are about the furtherance of the development on the island. And as such, as a woman and as a spouse of a parliamentarian, I think you have an integral role in, chucking a little something that other persons, the average man or woman, would not be able to chuck. But again, the issue lies, are these persons actually passionate about these issues? And I think that is the main concern there.
Okay, Alia, what do you think? The spouse of the prime minister or chief secretary, etc. If it's female, what is her role?
Um, as Janae would have said, her role will be to speak on issues affecting females particularly, and speak on any issue generally, because I mean, you will have reference to all issues happening. You will see all issues happening. You will have first-hand reference to all of them. So, as a woman, as a wife, as a spouse, you're supposed to take the ground for women there in that aspect of it, because you serve at a certain hierarchy and you see what's going on in the world. So you take the stance for women there and then. But in Trinidad and Tobago, I would have seen that the spouses for male politicians have their own life entirely. Like, it doesn't have nothing to do with the male politician. Like, they have their own life entirely, as in, if I'm a lawyer, I go to work every day and everything is like that. The nation business isn't my own unless I am called or invited to a ceremony and then I make my face known there. And then they aren't even given a speech. They aren't given the way to say a speech, to say a few words, nothing. And I personally find that that is bad, because if you look at in the United States, the first lady is her entire job. Michelle Obama was a lawyer and she had an entire job as a first lady, but she also made it known to females that she wanted to do something more. So it could be good and bad, because she, in her movie Becoming, I remember her saying that first lady was an entire job for her and she was happy that it happened, but she also wanted to go back to law and be the lawyer that she actually wanted to be. So I think that in Trinidad and Tobago, we focus on them having their own life, and that's a good, but we at least need to give them some play in that they have a say in the issues of the land, and that's my view on it.
Miss John, your view, and maybe you could tie in a foreign perspective on it, and you could compare what you see exists in Trinidad and Tobago and what you see other first ladies or other spouse of female prominence have been doing to support the male role.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with what I've heard. I think that the role can be, certainly enhanced here in Trinidad and Tobago, because I can't really actually tell you the name of the spouse of the prime minister because I don't hear it. And I can't tell you the name of the spouse of the former chief secretary, who I probably had more dealings with than in the current context, the acting chief secretary now. But I don't even know if the acting chief secretary now is married. I mean, so that just goes to show that there isn't a lot of profile for these spouses. I think that it really could be a combination of things. There have been first ladies in the US. There have been wives of prime ministers in Canada and elsewhere who have taken on roles that were very much in the background, but very relevant, and definitely helped to move the political agenda forward because they had very key roles in advising their husbands. While they didn't maybe take on, a big public role, they were there. I mean, the one I really think of, two of them I can think of from the U.S. One would be Eleanor Roosevelt way back when, very, very key to her husband, to FDR's role. And then also Nancy Reagan, who managed to push forward a whole agenda, or to get her husband to push forward a whole agenda about saying no to drugs. I mean, that didn't work out very well for Black people, but nevertheless, it was her her influence there. In Canada, we currently have a very young prime minister, and so therefore he has a fairly young spouse. And she, we know who she is. She plays a very key role in supporting some areas that she has an interest in, which have to do with women, very much so, the empowerment of women. And also the empowerment of youth. And those are things that I guess through their conversations, she expressed an interest in. And the prime minister, when he got elected, gave her those things that she just sort of ran with, much the same as Michelle Obama. So I think they can have kind of a dual role, or they can have the role where they perform best. If they're best in sort of taking up more of a back seat in the sort of tradition, when you say backseat, but actually get things done by all the advice that they give to their spouse, that's great. There's nothing to fault there. Not everyone is a public figure or can be a public figure or wants to stand up and make speeches and whatnot, but they can still have a key role. Or if they choose the other, they really, I think in my view, should be encouraged to take on a role that they can bring something to the table.
I am mixed about the views that were shared today, but I guess it just really depends on our political system and the expectations of the people, what the people want to see from that spouse at the point in time. I want to bring in this question from social media, and I want Ms. Job to answer this one because she started to talk about that a bit. Do you think that there's a greater incidence of sexual harassment against women in politics due to the great level of power held by men in that field? You started to touch on it, and I just want you to finish the points that you were raising there by answering the person's question on social media.
The sexual harassment is an age-old phenomenon. I have been a victim of that myself. And we do not take it very seriously because men tend to get away with it most of the time. Yeah. Not just in Trinidad and Tobago. Like I said, throughout the Commonwealth, we come across these issues. If you want a promotion, you probably have to sleep with the boss. If you want, women tend to think, well, not women tend to think, men tend to think that we are just par for the course. And I'm going to choose my words very carefully here. If we look at the present number 45, President of the United States, it's no secret that it was all over the media, the clip of the audio where he said he grabs whatever he has to grab and so on and so forth. But today he's still the president. And we have had issues of other men who were accused of sexual harassment, and they assumed high office. I think as women, we are the ones who need to change this. We are the ones who need to stand up against it. But what you find generally is that when this happens, the men are very skilled at organizing that crusade against you. Yeah? So you have a crusade of women who would say, well, it never happened, and they come with all sorts of things. But it's happening. It's real. It's happening. I'm not sure to what extent now it is happening, but I know for sure that having been a victim of that, I know for sure that it is happening. And if we, the women, do not stand up, it is going to continue to happen. We have to support each other. And women must be able to go to a higher up, a senior person or somebody or another woman and that person has an obligation to pick it up, because let's face it, we are just as qualified as you are, even more qualified, and therefore we ought not to be going through this in order to be promoted as a favorite. It ought not to be happening.
Miss John, as an employer, maybe you might be able to speak to this also. How do you think women really survive in the world of work, in the field of an organization, when they're being bombarded by these sexual offenses, with the men putting it against them? How do you think women should really react to that?
Well, actually, in the past and probably all the time, I have a heck of a lot to say about this, because I have, as Ms. Job was saying, I have had this similar situation where I was, a victim of sexual harassment when I was younger and coming up through the federal public service in Canada. Now, I don't know if it was my Trinidadian roots or what, but I always kind of had a way to open my mouth and say, hey, wait a minute, what are you doing? Like, knock it off, right? But not everybody was like me. So lots of people I know, I would hear the stories where women were, grabbed. I had to stand up for women who were being pulled into back offices and being told they were going to lose their job if they wouldn't have sex with the boss in a restaurant I worked, and, all kinds of things. It was rampant. By the time I got into the public service, and I spent a couple of decades and more there, things had changed. And what I wanted to kind of address is that, yes, women do face all of these things. But one of the things I like to, sometimes distinguish, I don't know too much of the American context, because as I said, I grew up in Canada. But for about the last 25 years or so, there has been legislation in place and policy in place that does not allow people to be harassed, women to be as harassed in the way that they used to be in the workplace, where there are people that they can turn to, and they're within, the HR department, or within, their bosses, or, to their boss's boss or whatever, to make their harassment complaints. They can do it anonymously, or they can do it by facing the person who is causing their distress. And there are mechanisms then to investigate and to find some redress for them. But it took a long time to get there. Today, however, when I had staff members, I ran fairly large staff. And if women came to any of their managers, and that somehow, ended up with me, it was my responsibility as the leader of that group to make sure that woman got the redress for whatever was happening, and whoever was causing this, whoever was harassing her was dealt with. And every year, everyone had to undergo anti-harassment training, and all the men, all the women, so they could recognize it within any given organization within the federal public service. I think that Trinidad and Tobago needs that kind of stuff to help to eradicate some of that. I'm sure that some of the legislation is in place, but does that turn into policy? Does that turn into regulation?
Okay, great. So we are looking at a conversation for those who are tuning in on the Facebook Live. This is a conversation hosted by Tobago Civil Net, a series called Talk the Real Things. And this afternoon, the panel, all distinguished ladies, both seasoned and young ladies, and we're discussing about Tobago women, just generally talking politics. And I want to shift the gears to some domestic issues here. And these are some issues where I want us to be frank, honest, and really just share your opinions on it. Don't feel as if you're being censored in any way, but it's really just to hear about the Tobago women views on specific topics. And the first one I have is the autonomy of Tobago. As a woman, and especially as a young woman, Janae and Aliyah, do you think Tobago needs its autonomy? Do you think there is a clear, distinct development plan for Tobago that could happen outside of the governance from Trinidad? What are your thoughts on this?
All right, so I I vehemently believe that Tobago is in dire need of its own autonomy, as we are a little bit too dependent on our twin island, Trinidad. However, at present, I don't think that we are ready for that advancement just yet because we haven't attained that level of self sufficiency. So while persons are pushing for this development, the question is asked, how would Tobago survive on its own if this was something that was to come into fruition now or in 2021? Um, there aren't enough mechanisms in place at present to really facilitate this development. However, I believe that it is much needed because we as an island have to rely a little bit too much on our sister isle to access basic resources and basic needs, even food, clothing, even shopping. You have to depend on Trinidad. Just if you reference the COVID-19 grants, I remember Tobagonians had to have their grant application sent to Trinidad for it to be processed. And while we understand that we are one island, we should be able to manage our own affairs. And as such, I think that our own autonomy is needed. However, the Tobago House of Assembly needs to be a little bit more strategic and make sure that they implement the different programs to ensure that we are ready for this. However, I would say it is much needed.
Alia, do you share the same views?
So I would have grown up with my grandparents, and I used to hear them talk about the time when Trinidad used to look at Tobago for everything, like as it pertains to food and stuff like that. Like Tobago was the island that had it, and Trinidad didn't, and now the roles are switched. In my perspective, in my eyes, I think that Tobago does need the autonomy, yes, but as Janice said, we aren't in a situation right now where that we are ready. Tobago needs to be economically independent because there are too many things we need to go to Trinidad for. Our land, our deeds need to go to Trinidad to be signed off. The labor, everything needs to go to Trinidad to be signed off. You need to go to Trinidad to get your passport signed off, and then they come back to Tobago. Your birth papers need to go to Trinidad to get them signed off, where there is a Registrar General office in Tobago. And my point is, what is the purpose of the office in Tobago if we still have to send everything to Trinidad? It doesn't make sense. But the people of Tobago, I don't think that we are ready for that massive change. And I think that we need to value what we have here also. We need to go back to the times where our agriculture is being pushed now, but it wasn't being pushed last 5 years as it is being pushed now. We need to go back to the times that we valued our blue dashi in some country, and we went and we picked a lot of avocados, and we went down to Trinidad every weekend and we sold them to Trinidadians, and we came back up and we were proud of that. We need to get back to that stage where we are proud of what we produce here in Tobago, because we have a lot to produce here and we have a lot going for us on this island, but we don't see it, and we think that Trinidad has a lot going for them. I heard someone said that recently that cocoa came from Trinidad, and I was really upset because there are lots of cocoa estates on the island of Tobago. I used to wake up every morning and pick a cocoa and eat it from Dalafa because I'm from country, and Trinidadians come here and they used to treasure that, but no more. So I think that Tobago needs to look at what we have and hold it sacred to us. And yes, we do need our own things here, but we don't need for Trinidad to feel that they are our big brother and big sister, and we have to run to them for everything because we don't need to. We could survive here with food for ourselves. We don't need to go to Trinidad for that. And the little things, the little signatures, there could be a person like that in Tobago to sign it up, because it's just a signature that we need on certain documents, and we have to take a whole flight. And sometimes you're not getting a flight, you're not getting a boat ticket. So how do you reach? And there are things that you will need for next week. Persons call you to get things done for this week, for next week. You have to try and get to Trinidad to get them done, and that is totally not good. So I think that we need to become economically independent, and from there we move on and we take the steps to attain autonomy, and we get through from there. But as I said, we need to value what we have on the island of Tobago.
So what I'm hearing from you and Janae is that y'all want it, but we're not ready yet. But aren't you the youths now? Aren't you the ones to bring the change? Now you're waiting for the future. You're waiting for your little brother and sister to bring that change. When the change really
Well,
happening?
Well, there's a rant that says youth voices are heard, but they are not heard, because the youths will speak out, and you're not saying you are here, but the older heads take it as we don't know them now come, they don't know nothing, they're now seeing what's going on, and they're trying to put this and this together. But my take on it is that we see the future, not saying that you all don't, but our ideas and yours we need the experience from you all, and you all need our fresh ideas, and we can merge them together. Even if I told you all to let us take out the roof and we put it a different way, you could say no, it used to go like this long time and that used to happen, and I could say, well, this is the new thing and this working better, and we can merge the two of them together because it works like that. So not saying that no, we aren't the youth to make it happen, but for us to make it happen, we also need your help. So I need the older ones to not take us as being rude when we speak out on something, because not all youths know how to speak properly and let things come across the board properly. And I think that the older heads need to understand that. So if we are passionate about something and we want something to happen, even if we just put half of a hand, you need to put the other half, and we could go down the road together, because we need you all as much as you all need us.
Okay, so hopefully within your lifetime, maybe in the next 5 years or so, before you hit 30s and you're considered old, we may get that autonomy for Tobago, probably. Miss Jo, what can you say? Because you have been a part of that journey from way back. Tell me, what are your thoughts on the autonomy for Tobago?
Way back, because I was a Robinson fanatic, and from way back in 1980, when we got our Tobago House of Assembly. Now, autonomy seems to be a very elusive word, because up to now, I don't understand what Tobagonians mean by autonomy. I don't understand what the Tobago politicians mean by autonomy, because we have some autonomy. And we got that through the Act 40 of 1996. We can formulate policy, even though there is something, I think it's notwithstanding Section 75 of the Constitution, which means that whatever we do can be probably overturned by the cabinet. I want to see in my lifetime which cabinet gonna overturn the policies that we make for Tobago's development. And we have not pushed the button, because we are able, you see some of the things the younger ladies talked about just now, like going to Trinidad. I don't think we're still going to Trinidad for a birth certificate. That had to be crazy. I'm not sure about that one. Are we still doing that? I'm not sure. But there are things.
No, I don't think we are. They do it digitally now
right
here.
Yeah. So but we look at things like even the visa, getting your American visa. There was a time when the Americans came to Tobago, when Lennox Denoon was chairman of the assembly. He brought them here, so we didn't have to go to Trinidad. They came here, they processed our stuff.
I remember that. My first visa, I got it at Fairfield Complex. Yes.
So there are things that we can do. Additionally, we have been talking about autonomy for years, for donkey years. But what have we put in place for autonomy? If autonomy means making legislation, and if autonomy means that if Tobago separates from Trinidad tomorrow morning, what is going to happen to the hospital? What is going to happen to the people who have to be flown to Trinidad? What is going to happen everywhere? So my take on this is, as much as we have not yet defined autonomy, and I feel we should define it, because I had my own views on it. I put in a paper on the last bill that they submitted to the parliament, and my strong recommendation was that it be withdrawn totally, and we do a proper document, because when I looked at it doesn't give us very much of anything. Yeah, or at least what I think that we need for Tobago. However, preparation is the key. We have been in charge of Tobago since 1980. And therefore, if we're looking for autonomy, we don't have a bank. We don't have the hospital not working properly. We don't have a proper system of so many things. We can't even feed ourselves. And this COVID issue would have magnified some of our shortcomings. Listen, as it's Holder, she talked about growing up in country. I grew up in Mariah, right? And just like you, we used to go down in the bush and pick cocoa and sell cocoa to hard content. Cocoa is our Trinitario cocoa, is the best cocoa in the whole world. We exported it. Yeah. And so I am saying that instead of we looking at cocoa beans and so on, we have to have a vision for where we want to go with this. Cocoa butter is the base of most of our cosmetics. It is chocolate. It is so many other things. But yet still, we left our cocoa estates to go to ruins. We are now, probably some people are now trying to bring it back. I'm not an agriculture person, so I understand there was some kind of disease. Even the coconut, you remember coconut? America say that we shouldn't eat use coconut oil because of whatever. No, coconut oil is the best thing since sliced bread. And so we gave up our coconut oil, and then we went to look at soya oil. Bay leaf, we have the bay oil, that bay leaf estates that we had up in Hope there. We had big recommendations and big plans to start to produce bay oil and all kind of thing. Nothing has happened. They put down Cove Estate. I don't know what is happening in Cove. I would love to know what is happening in Cove right now, because to me that is just a big white elephant where so many things could have happened. We are looking at recycling. We are looking at technology. We're looking at all kinds of things that could happen in Tobago without the intervention of Trinidad. And so if we have to be economically self-sufficient, then we have to look at what we are going to produce. And, you know, Lloyd Best was one of my teachers. And he said to me, if you're going to run this country, you got to know how it works. Okay? We don't understand how a country works. And therefore, our politicians go into office, sit down for 16 years, and when they get up, we have a pack of cards. The house fall apart. And then we blame everybody else except ourselves. So Tobago has had the perfect opportunity. I worked under A&R Robinson, and the kind of plans they had for Tobago, if Robinson had the money that London had, over $35 billion, you know what happened in Tobago? We started with little and nothing. We had, I don't know if you remember, we developed those cottages in Goldsboro, where we started to export taste of Tobago. Yeah, that just went down the barrel. We started doing hams. I buy my ham in Tobago, call up the marketing division last week. I call in early because I want my ham. Well, Miss Job, you know you can't get no ham because the machine break down since last year. And it ain't fixed up to now. So who is responsible for all those things? And then again, we can't look at tertiary production. We just not selling, listen, cassava, farine. If you go to St. Lucia, you ever went to St. Lucia? Go to St. Lucia. I passed from a place where they're selling all kind of farine. If you see all, it's cassava, whatever. But it is a peanut with cassava with all kind of things they're doing with it. It didn't take no rocket science for us to do things in Tobago for ourselves. But you know what too? As consumers, our tastes have changed. And so we import a lot of what we eat. And so it sends the food bill up, and then we eat in all these things that we don't know what I make them with and bring them back. I'm glad I grew up on bush tea and things. So right now I can't eat, I can't get on teeth. I don't have no money. I could go in the backyard, pick a banana, boil it, and eat that with salt and oil. I have no problems with that at all. And it's healthy. Okay? So we as Tobagonians have to understand we cannot make legislation. We cannot legislate at this point in time. But we have the ability, we have the opportunity, we have whatever it takes to make the policy. These politicians who are looking to get into the assembly need to understand that they are the ones to take it up right now. We can make policy to change our situation in Tobago. Don't just go there and walk and jump all the place in a white boots or going and visit the garden or whatever. That don't cut it, right? We want serious, and before, let me just say this. We have had development program after development program. We must get about 10 million development programs sitting on a shelf somewhere in Tobago. Nobody uses it. So, Miss.
So are you saying, Miss Job, then, even without the new legislation that comes with the Tobago autonomy, there are still some policy directives that we need to have sorted out first? Yeah,
but Tobago is in charge of policy formulation. Just read the schedule. We in charge of the hospital, we in charge of education, we in charge of agriculture, we in charge of tourism, we in charge of all these things. What are we doing with the in charge of? Just walk on.
Well, I want to bring in Miss John here with a business mind. Tell me, how could the Tobago autonomy really help you in terms of your business, especially when business probably really slow on the island right now anyways?
Well, I mean, first I have to say I have to thank Ms. Job for her comments, because I'm learning more in this in this session about Tobago than I think I've learned since I've been here. A lot of the history, a lot of why people are asking for things that they're asking for, and all of that. It puts it in a good context for me. But in terms of business, I mean, certainly, I have to tell you, to be quite honest, I came here sort of naively thinking that because it was a small place, because I had some roots in the country, because it kind of runs on the same kind of political spectrum that I'm familiar with, that I figured that things that I would need to obtain from the bureaucracy would be relatively easy to help me start a business. I was 150% wrong. It was difficult. It was laborious. I couldn't believe how many times I had to go to the various organizations like Town and Country, and what it took to get a license, that I had to actually go and present myself in court. A lot of the processes and a lot of the steps to start my business were way more difficult than I had anticipated. The paperwork was incredible. So I know that if these are requirements from Trinidad for businesses in Tobago, then I think something needs to change. There has to be a better way that Tobagonian businesses can get access to what they require to run their businesses easier. For example, when I had to get the inspection for the Wine and Goat, my wine and tapas bar, I had to wait for a magistrate to come from Trinidad to be able to come in and inspect my small 20-person operation. I couldn't believe that there wasn't somebody here in Tobago who could do that. When it was Tobago that I went to the court, it was Tobago, like it just didn't make any sense. Even to get a passport, one of my kids have dual citizenship, and one of them wanted the passport. We had to wait until some of the documentation was obtained from Trinidad. I mean, I just find it, I can say that certainly from a business perspective, it could be easier. And if autonomy was something, if some of the conversation is about trying to make those things easier in an autonomous world, then I would support that. However, I caveat all of that by saying, I don't think that I agree with the young folks here that Tobago is not ready for autonomy. And I say that from the experiences I've had since I've been here, what I've looked at when it comes to telecommunications, infrastructure. Maybe I wasn't thinking about agriculture, but that's probably one of it. Economic power, all of those things, I don't think Tobago is ready. I come from a country where there's a province of 8 million people who've been talking about separation for the last 40 years from the rest of the country, and they still haven't managed to make it happen, because all the time when push comes to shove, Quebec realizes they really can't do it on their own, even though they have some of the resources in the country that we all depend on. Because it takes a whole lot more than that to actually run a country. I certainly wouldn't want to be responsible for voting for anyone to make Tobago autonomous and then watch it not work. So,
So the general consensus from the panel so far is that yes, the autonomy for Tobago is on our wish list, but we need to line up with ducks in order first, yeah? Preparation. We see a lot of work needs to be done in terms of preparation. Our time is ticking down, and this is such a wonderful discussion that we have been having with these women as we have women talk politics in Tobago. And we want to wind down with two main questions. And if possible, if you could keep the comments brief so that we can have everybody making the rounds on the question. The first one has to do with, what does the panel think about Tobago's political climate in general? Now, we know elections coming up. Do you see it starting to get hostile? Do you see it antagonistic? Or are we still everybody's best friend and everybody normal? What do you think is the political climate like in Tobago now? We'll start with Janae.
All right, so notably, we are indeed at the peak of the THA political season. From my observations, I haven't seen anything that was outright malicious against any particular candidate, but the climate is definitely tense. You can tell that even among the individual parties there are disparities and grievances, and it really leaves us as the population to be in awe and wondering about how would things really go. And I would say that most times around elections, the environment is a little bit hostile most times. You would see negative comments made by different persons, and sometimes it's not even by the candidates, it's by us, the voting populace, because as as persons in society, some of us really take this politics thing a little bit too serious, and sometimes we get into personal attacks against persons, all in the name of politics. And as a young person, I have seen that occur on many different occasions. And as a young person, I peruse social media quite frequently, and you would see persons really scrutinizing persons due to their political affiliation. Like, I have this issue with persons calling persons like stupid and dunce because of their political affiliation. And I find that is something that we need to discourage. Everybody has their opinion and everybody votes for a different reason. And I don't think that anybody has the authority or right to place anybody else under scrutiny because of their political affiliation. And, we engage in a lot of politics that is sometimes deemed as nasty and malicious, and we term it under picong. And I also want us to, get out of that mindset. We need to make it clean as possible and set the right examples for the younger generation. And we are the younger generation, and I hope that looking at the election, I realize that there is the emergence of a lot of young persons vying for positions. And I hope that they would really bring a difference to this political arena and lead with class and professionalism.
Thank you, Jenny. Well said. Aliyah, how would you compliment what Jenny said?
I totally agree with her on some points. I would say that the night is young because elections may be next month, and usually the bombshells drop a week before, 3 days before. Like, they wait until the air actually getting hot and they drop all the dirty stuff. And we always, as citizens, we always want a clean election. But politics is a dirty game. And I for one think that growing up in politics with my grandparents working with ANR, that I don't think that it will ever be something that's not dirty. It will be clean to the point that our election campaign will be clean, but politics in itself, the whole atmosphere around it, is a dirty thing, because I would have been told as a young person before, you ain't achieved nothing yet, so don't put your hand in the ring for politics, because they will cut you and chew you up and spit you out. and it will be very hard. So as a young person going into politics and hearing that, you get scared now, and you have to watch every step you do, because if you want to go into politics at the age of 12 and you're looking at politicians and you want to go into politics in the future, you have to make sure that you have no skeletons in the closet, because they do it, they go through your life with a fine teeth comb. And it's not until election, the night before election, 2 days before election, they just drop everything. And I think as a society, we need to get out of that. And as Janice said, throwing pick on it, it has its good and bad, because you throw pick on in the chamber, in the house, for your partners, and it's sometimes pick on is personal, where we don't get to that point because it's thrown over a bill or something that's happening in Parliament. And I, for one, think that that's not good on the points of us being citizens, because it shows dirty words at your partner, and outside of the chamber, all of us have friends and all of us have lives, and most of us will have went to school together. So not because we have different political views or we are support different political parties mean that we need to be at war. We don't need to be at war. It's one nation, it's one country, and I think that we all should have the same objective for our country to flourish and do better. So it doesn't matter which side of the bench that you sit on, play the game clean. And as you play the game clean, do it for your country and not for your personal self. That's my take on it.
Nice, nice, nice. Miss Job, what is your observations about the political climate right now in Tobago?
You know, I love the young ladies and the aspirations. I love what Alia just said, you know, play it clean and so on. But given what I am seeing, I mean, I don't peruse Facebook as plenty young people, but I go on there from time to time. And given what I am seeing, it's going to be a very nasty election. Um, there are allegations of corruption running rife all around the country and on the island. And up to tonight on the news, I was hearing, you know, about some bus shed that costs how much hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they call in the secretary to account and so on. That was on the news tonight. And I see things on Facebook of persons who have not been selected going to their people and say, well, don't vote for that one there because we don't wash it. So there's going to be some problems in this Tobago House of Assembly election. Whether it is upfront or whether it's subterranean, there is going to be problems. There are going to be problems. One of the things I hope, and like Aliyah and the other young lady, Alana, sorry, I forget.
Janae.
Right. I'm hoping that you know, you can make your accusation or you can say what you have to say in a way that it is not derogatory, it is not defamatory and so on. You can say those things. Because I remember when I ran, I didn't know anything about politics when I got in there. I just know, like I said, I just went in there to go from the strategic level. But they brought me a file, and I always talk about this. They brought me a file on Hojoy Giles and things about. I said, but what is it y'all want me to go and say with this? So I took the file, and I don't know where the file is up to today. I should have kept it though. I put it aside because, you know, my thing is tomorrow after the elections, I must be able to meet Mr. Charles and say good morning, and Mr. Charles must answer me. Okay. And so we have to have respect for each other. We can bring out our issues. We all went to school. We all know words. We all can communicate. So bring your issues out, but you don't have to go down into the gutter to do that. So I'm hoping that what I am seeing manifesting itself on Facebook and what I'm hearing about, given what is happening in Tobago, that this election will not be what I think is going to be. Because as Aliyah just said, Dr. Eric Williams said it better. He said politics is a nasty game that good people play. So we wait.
We wait. Miss John, your thoughts on the political landscape, I guess, looking out from within?
I would definitely have to be looking out from within, because I actually spent recently repatriated back to Tobago because I went out to Canada and then couldn't come back. and got stuck there and 5.5 months. So I've missed a lot of the, a lot of what's been going on and on the political landscape. But so I can't really speak specifically about what's been happening here in Tobago because I haven't really noticed it. But what I can say is that we've seen all kinds of examples of horrible political games and about of nastiness and of just gutter politics when we've looked at how American politics have been run, particularly in the last election from the Trump campaign. I mean, it can go from absolute bad to absolute worse. Nobody should be wanting to emulate that. Nobody should be looking at dirty politics as being a way to play the game. There are very many other examples in world politics where people have run campaigns and they've run clean campaigns. They've said things about their opponents. They've not, they've pointed out policy and programs that they don't like. They've slammed them on a number of issues, but they don't slam the people. And that's I think what was being alluded to before. There's no need for that. You can stay to what is important to the citizenry, which is how you tackle the issues and not lose your humanity in running a campaign. I don't think that. I think Obama ran a fairly clean campaign. Trudeau ran a fairly clean campaign. If you look around other jurisdictions, you don't get that level of nastiness. So I think Trinidad and Tobago could take their example from somewhere else besides maybe the American political sphere.
And I totally agree. I think we're all looking forward to a positive THA elections 2021. I think we really want to hear the issues. We need to realize that it's all 60,000 of us need to live on this space in love and harmony and peace. So whether whoever wins, may the best candidate or the best party win, but definitely there's life in Tobago after that election day and the results are out. We're pretty much wrapping up today's discussion. Thank you so much, wonderful ladies. We had Eudine Job, a politician. We had Miss Jan, who is a businesswoman. We had Alia Holder, who is a youth advocate. And we had Janae Campbell, the current president of the Tobago Youth Council. And this afternoon, women talked politics. We covered a lot of issues, and it was really nice having all the panelists here to share their insight and to share their knowledge. This is a production of the Tobago Civil Net, which is a non-aligned group. It comprises of a lot of NGOs on the island and people with general interest in different sectors of Tobago, whether it's tourism, business, agriculture, etc., and have come together to really have some healthy discussions about different issues on the island of Tobago. Our next session will be carried for this Thursday. So this Thursday at 8 p.m. And the topic we will be featuring is a post-COVID tourism recovery plan. Everybody wants to know where Tobago going in 2021, right? And we know we were dependent on tourism for a really long time. So we need to talk about whether tourism is really going to be sustained or what are we doing post-COVID about tourism. So we are looking forward to exciting and really youthful and seasoned panelists again will be here to talk about the post-COVID tourism recovery plan. So please stay tuned to Tobago Civil Net. Please like our Facebook page. Please share it with your friends. Let's have as much Tobagonians involved in the discussions as much as possible. As we said, this is non-aligned. It doesn't matter the political party that you belong to. We just want to hear the different perspectives and the different views on the issues that are happening in Tobago, so that can help persons make informed choices and informed decisions about what's going on the island. I have been your host for this afternoon, Latoya Roberts. It was a pleasure discussing with you, lovely ladies, and do enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Keep safe, keep healthy, and let's look forward to future discussions on Tobago civilness. Thank you for those who tuned in on the live on Facebook. We appreciate all the comments and all the questions that were posed this afternoon. Keep them coming, and we look forward to a great session. Until next time, do enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.